Hey man, what's your take on this passage in the Bible?
Hit me with it.
Well, it's two passages actually. Let's start in Matthew 16 verse 28, where Jesus says to his disciples, "Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom."
Ah, yes.
And then we have Matthew 24, where Jesus is again talking to his disciples. And in verse 34 he says, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." And so I think we have an instance here where Jesus kind of fails to follow through with his promise. Because I'm pretty sure all his disciples have tasted death by now, and their generation definitely did pass.
Right. So these passages are tricky, and I'm not going to pretend there's no controversy here. It doesn't matter what I'll say, there will be Christians who watch this and disagree with me, and that's okay. I think this is a secondary issue that we can have fun talking about as brothers and sisters in Christ, but the bottom line is no, I don't think Jesus failed here at all. And I'll do my best to give you my perspective, but I'll share briefly some plausible answers that others may give.
Okay.
So let's start with Matthew 16, this verse about those who wouldn't taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. There are some Bible thinkers who will attribute this to the Apostle John, who died very old after his exile to the island of Patmos, and some of the other apostles who died after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. So they didn't taste death until after it came to pass, is the idea.
Okay.
There are some who believe that it's referring to Judas, as he did die before the resurrection. And in the following verses in the next chapter describes Peter, James, and John being taken by Jesus to the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus reveals himself in his full glory. You can read that in chapter 17, verses 1 through 13.
Okay.
As for Matthew 24, with "this generation shall not pass," I think there's really only ever been two popular views on this. One being that it's literal, and that Jesus already did return during the apostles' lifetime. That would be the full preterist view. And the other view would be that Jesus is talking about the generation that would see these signs that he describes in the earlier passages. So at whatever point in history and whatever generation starts seeing these signs, that generation won't pass. That's the idea.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right, which I tend to believe personally is the best interpretation of the passage. Only because if you study prophecy, there are some glaring things that haven't come to pass yet. Just one example is the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah chapter 17. Damascus is still standing today, and actually is just recently being hit all of a sudden, which is very interesting. One other view that I think is worth considering is going to the Greek here with this word generations. It's the word genea, and it's not only used for the word generation, but also nation or period of time.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, so if it's just talking about the nation of Israel not passing away until these things come to pass, then that kind of falls in line with the incredible fact that Israel seemingly has miraculously survived until today.
Right.
So those are some options, but let me touch one more time on Matthew 16, on this idea of those who were in Jesus' midst and not tasting death until they saw him coming in his kingdom.
Okay.
This phrase, tasting death, shows up only one other time in the entire Bible, in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9. It says, "But we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone." So that's very interesting. Jesus tasted death for us. Do you remember the mother of James and John asking Jesus to seat her two sons at his right and at his left in his kingdom? And then he says, "You don't know what you're asking," and then later asks, "Would you drink the cup that I drink?"
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Then in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus is weeping in agony, begging the Father to let this cup pass from me, as long as it was in his will. And Christians understand that when we take the cup at the Lord's Supper, as Jesus tells John and James, that we too partake in Christ's suffering when we submit our lives to him. This whole warning that Jesus gives that you too will be persecuted for my name's sake, and you will face trouble in this world, but take heart for I have overcome the world.
Right.
So Jesus drank the cup of God's wrath, the wrath that we escape when we allow Jesus to take that wrath for us. So let's read Matthew 16 again with this in mind. And so remind me, who is Jesus talking to?
It says disciples.
Right, which didn't mean just the apostles. There are many times that Jesus had followers who were called disciples that fell away. John chapter 6 verse 60 is a great example. Many people followed him for the wrong reasons and then walked away. So I'm going to read these verses again with the thought in mind that there were possibly those following him whose faith wasn't genuine. They didn't have faith in who he was to escape from God's wrath.
Okay.
So here it is. It says, "Then Jesus told his disciples, 'If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeit his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul?'" Okay, let's stop for a second there. Did this sound like something the apostles needed to hear? I bet Judas probably did, but for the rest of them, did they not understand they couldn't hold on to the things of this world and follow Jesus at the same time?
Well,
in Matthew chapter 19, verse 27, Peter says to Jesus, "See, we have left everything and followed you." What then will we have? So it seems these guys understood that concept. This makes it more clear to me that Jesus was talking to more than just his apostles here. He then says, "For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." So could this be Jesus basically saying, yeah, every one of you guys will die in this world, your bodies will go into the grave, but those who believe in me will not be tasting the death that I swallow on the cross? Which is interesting because that's the word Paul uses in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 54. He says, death is swallowed up in victory, which is the second death, the wrath of God. But those who are standing here lacking faith, denying me while I reveal exactly who I am, you think death in this world is bad enough? Just wait till you see me coming with my kingdom. You're going to taste death yourself. The plate I offered to take off your table, but you slapped away.
Dang, I never saw it that way before.
I'm not saying this is the correct way to interpret this. I think it makes sense, given the context I just provided, but the bottom line is, no, this isn't Jesus failing anything. There are answers here that make a lot of sense.